Welcome, everybody. We had a little drop back into winter, but I understand we'll have spring weather again by the weekend. But that's such it is in Kansas. I was looking real quickly. I did not see any guests, other than the fact that I did see our newest member, Stephen Robinson, I think is on the line. So welcome to our club meeting via Zoom. And of course, we're shooting.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. We're looking for in-person meetings starting April 1st at the zoo. I'm excited about that. We'll go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll go ahead and recite it. And here it is. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And we'll have people mute so we don't get dogs barking and telephones in the background. But I do have a number of announcements, and I'm scanning real quick to see if Vince is on the line. You've probably seen it in the paper or on Facebook, but congratulations to our future president, Vince. Oh, there's Vince.
I am.
Okay, cool.
Vince is here for training.
Vince is now immortalized in Topeka history because he has a sandwich named after him at the Pennant. And it is Vince's Party Melt. It's a patty melt, but it's called a party melt. So anyway, congratulations to Vince. And that's in recognition of all he's done to help redevelop downtown Topeka.
Thank you.
Several other announcements. This evening, we're going to have a combination wine tasting and fireside chat. That will kick off around 7 o'clock, and Steve Knoll's going to kind of go through a wine sampling, and that'll be a little bit shorter than usual because at 7:30 we're going to shift over to a fireside chat. And I ask that you join in, even if it's not right at the beginning. Try and join us by 7:30. We are going to have questions for our members. We're going to solicit feedback so that we can do some planning for Marie's year and the post-pandemic life that our club will soon see. And so kickoff wine tasting at 7, fireside chat 7:30. And just FYI, the wine Steve's going to be sampling is Klein Cashmere. It's around $14 a bottle. I think it's readily available. Now, you don't have to have that wine for the wine tasting. It is a red blend, I understand. So if you want to do something else, and you don't even have to partake, if you just want to enjoy the camaraderie of doing that. This kind of came late, but our club received a commendation from our district for our Polio Plus fundraising in the 2019-2020 year. Of course, that was Joni's year. And I didn't realize the number, but according to the letter I got in just yesterday's mail, we raised $23,861 for Polio Plus during Joni's year. So that is quite a feat, and we should be proud of what we've done there. We do have a Rotary Cubed meeting coming up on March 25th. So that's a week from today. And as you might remember, Rotary Cubed is a Rotary Club of Topeka, Harlem, and Minneapolis. We get together and periodically have programs focused on social justice. This one, and actually the 3 clubs are going to take turns hosting the meetings. This one will be hosted by the Rotary Club of Harlem. And the subject is microaggressions, a discussion using restorative practices. Kind of an interesting topic, and I kind of look forward to that, although I'm afraid I think I have a conflict. Going forward, we are going to post the minutes of the board meeting on our website. In fact, I think the February minutes are already up there. So if anybody wants to kind of dig a little deeper and find out what's going on at the board level, you will have access to those minutes once they're approved by the board. Our first Rotary Rubbish Roundup was supposed to be on the 13th. Of course, we had some bad weather, and we're gonna shoot again for April 10th. That's a Saturday morning. So you might want to put that on your calendar, and we'll have more details coming forward. But I think as we planned originally, we'll meet at the Rotary Park and then fan out from there. The RILA application, the Rotary Youth Leadership Academy, The application is now on the website. That is for high schoolers who have completed their junior or their sophomore and junior year. And there will be an in-person day camp in Lawrence. There'll also be a virtual option. They're still working on the details. So when I have those details, I'll push those out. But RILA is a great opportunity for high schoolers. The District 5710 Foundation Banquet is this Saturday night. They're still accepting reservations if you want to attend in person, but you can also attend virtually. That's free of charge. There will be both live and silent auctions, and I believe the people that attend virtually can participate in those auctions. So if you are interested, even if it's just virtually attending, you can register at the district website. I believe that is the extent of my announcements, but quite a few, and that's good news because I think activities are picking back up. I'm going to turn it over to Steve to now introduce our presenters today.
Thank you, Stan. So Tim Ellis has been the head coach at Washburn Rural for the debate team for the past 8 years. In his tenure, Washburn Rural has won 7 trophies at the state debate tournament, including 5 state championships. They have been recognized as a top 20 debate school in the nation on 4 separate occasions. And in 2019, Washburn Rural won a National Speech and Debate Association National Championship. And I'm so pleased to introduce Tim, and he'll introduce his students and tell us a little bit about what they're going to talk about.
Thank you all for having us. We're pretty excited to get to do a little demo debate here for you all. This year, so the way that policy debate works is that every year there is a single topic that the students will delve into for the entirety of the season. This year's topic was about criminal justice reform. So the affirmative team in the debate round will usually offer some sort of plan as to how we could reform the criminal justice system. And the negative team has to respond with reasons why that particular proposal might not be a good idea. Today, we are going to specifically debate one of those proposals, which is abolishing the death penalty and life without parole, so lengthier sentences. And that'll sort of be the demonstration that we are going to do today. We have some like shortened speech times for what we normally do, but hopefully it'll still be a good snapshot of what these students involve themselves in throughout the year. The 4 students who won the state championship this year are all juniors here at Washburn Rural High School. So we're very excited about their success and hopefully the opportunity for them to come back and try and win another state championship next year. The team that's going to be presenting the affirmative argument today that we should abolish the death penalty are Sonia Doubledee and Donna Holosos. They were also the team that represented the affirmative at state this year when we were competing. And the negative team is Zach Willingham and Ji-Yoon Park. And they also were our negative team at the state championship this year. We're going to do like 4-minute speeches, and then we'll have one short cross-examination in the middle of the first 2 speeches to sort of mimic the style of debate, although not perfect, but sort of mimic the style of debate that these students have been doing throughout the year. So without further ado, I think we'll have Sonia get up and present.
Hi, I'm Sonia Doubledee. I'm going to be presenting the first affirmative speech. Let me go ahead and pull it up and then we'll begin. The United States racist past of the 17th and 18th centuries has manifested itself into our current criminal justice system in the form of capital punishment, the most egregious example of modern-day slavery. However, our dark past is now under the spotlight and has exposed itself in the roots of the institutions that exist today. The criminal justice system disproportionately targets people of color, stripping them of their rights and essentially what it means to be human by having the power to sentence those who are convicted to death. As long as the government retains the unjust authority to lawfully execute its own citizens, so too will we never be able to truly achieve the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in our never-ending struggle for equality. Thus, my partner and I propose the following plan. The United States federal government should abolish the death penalty and life without parole because it is a violation of human dignity. Contention 1 is solvency. Centering abolition around dignity allows anti-death penalty efforts to continue the product of radical slavery abolitionists. It is the only strategy that addresses the root of injustice in the criminal justice system and affirms that no life is worth less than another. This is by Dr. Marakat Malkani, 18. Slavery and the death penalty are institutional manifestations of the belief that some people's lives are worth less than others. Abolition must be understood within the context of slavery and historical efforts to eradicate racial subjugation, which was to end practices that are not compatible with the idea of dignity. Abolition should be centered on dignity. Anything short of a radical approach would enable illness to thrive. A non-radical approach risks entrenching values at the root of the problem with capital punishment. It is not that wholesale change can be brought about overnight, but rather to develop the framework for bringing about such changes in the future. The death penalty is just one manifestation. Death penalty abolitionism has drawn attention to fallibility of justice and the necessity of checks on prosecutorial power. The legacy of slavery has its tentacles wrapped around all facets of American life, although abolishing the death penalty might only unwrap one. If the process and act of abolition is framed in dignity, then it could be the precursor to unwrapping many others. Contention 2 is the advantage. Execution must be rejected in all instances because every human life has value. Death is irreversible and steals the opportunity for improving. This is by policy analyst Davis in 2019. Execution never results in justice. This will never right the wrongs of the crimes convicted people have already convicted. A perfect criminal justice system does not exist. The government can no longer risk executing the wrong people in the name of justice. Wrongful convictions happen due to honest human mistakes, junk science, false confessions, government misconduct, faulty snitches, and bad lawyering. No person is immune from fallibility. The government doesn't value its own citizens enough to protect them from potential errors of the justice system. Human life is enough of an argument to repeal the death penalty nationally and in every state. You cannot teach a society that killing is wrong by killing. Allowing the government to decide when to end a person's life is one of the most tyrannical powers. Keeping the death penalty leaves the door open for politicians to apply it as a penalty for other crimes. The federal government should recognize every human life is valuable, and risking even one potentially innocent person's life is not worth the retribution some believe the death penalty provides. And deterrence theory is wrong. Multiple studies prove they have no correlation, and enforcement makes it worse. This is from the National Institute of Justice in 2016. Deterrence is a theory of choice in which individuals balance the benefits and costs of crime. The certainty of being caught is a more powerful deterrent than the punishment. Sending an individual to prison isn't a very effective way to deter crime. Long sentences are unlikely to deter future crime. Inmates learn more about effective crime from each other, and time spent may desensitize many to the threat of future imprisonment. Increasing the severity of punishment does little to deter crime. Laws and policies increasing the severity of punishment are ineffective because criminals know little about the sanctions for specific crimes. There is no proof that the death penalty deters criminals. Thank you, and I'm now ready for cross-examination.
I think, Sonia, because of time, we're going to do cross-ex after Zach's speech, and we'll just have both of you ask questions to each other.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Okay, with that, I'm going to start. I'm Zach Willingham. I'll be giving the first negative speech today. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay, cool. And let's begin. The AF's overly optimistic view ignores the painful yet true realities of our world. It is simply non-falsifiable to say that all people can be redeemed and rehabilitated. Their plan would set the worst of the worst free, endangering the safety of the American people. Not all life can be valuable when one life is seeking to end the other. Setting a serial killer loose is simply not a risk that June and I are willing to take, which is why we stand in strong negation of abolishing the death penalty and life without parole. Although an imperfect system is our only solution in the face of threats from the most dangerous people. First, they are wrong about innocence being executed wrongly because ending it won't stop convictions, but actually increases the likelihood that claims of innocence will be canvassed. Jordan Steicher, professor of law at the University of Texas in 2014, remained skeptic about the strength of the argument from innocence. Beneath innocence is the naive view that without the death penalty, significant errors and false convictions would be discovered and corrected. The argument goes, if someone is sentenced to life rather than death, there's always a possibility of vindication. This view ignores the disturbing fact that non-death sentence inmates rarely have any review of their conviction. The presence of the death penalty increases the likelihood that claims of innocence will be canvassed. more resources, attention, and public concern flow to condemn inmates rather than those merely facing lengthy confinement. And they highly exaggerate the risk of wrongful conviction. They may estimate a few anecdotes, but ignore the numbers. This comes from Ben Zeiker, a resident scholar at the AEI in 2019. The argument that society cannot risk one execution of an innocent is misguided. Most of us risk death daily in order to drive automobiles, participate in extreme sports, or watch a Lifetime channel. Anyone would be willing to bear the incremental risk of wrongful execution to obtain the far more important reductions in serious crime. Secondly, there's robust statistical support for harsher punishments in their key role in public safety and health. In fact, each execution resulted in 18 fewer murders nationwide. This comes from David Maholton, who is a PhD and research fellow in policy analysis from 2014. A comprehensive view of research since 1975 finds a deterrent effect. Investigations consistently demonstrate a strong link between executions and murder rates. A study by Emory found that each execution results in 18 fewer murders per county. Capital punishment does save lives. And while life sentences may not save lives like the death penalty, they still play a vital role in preventing other forms of violent crime, things like rape, kidnapping, and robberies. This comes from Kleinsuper, a professor of justice and criminology at University of Pittsburgh in 2020. For every 1,000 people serving life without parole, we expect violent crime to decline by 12%. Life without parole reduces crime by 40 violent crimes per 100,000 population. The effect of life without parole is statistically significant and positive. For every percentage point increase in the percentage of prisoners sentenced to life without parole, violent crime is expected to decline by 3%.
Hey, Zach, my name is
Life without
Roger, and
parole.
I'm interrupting you, and I apologize. But for this audience of really old people like me, your combination of fast speech and the blips in your microphone are making it very hard to understand you. So please just slow down and forgive
Okay,
me
that's
for
so
the
bad.
interruption.
Sorry. Yep. Okay. These harsh sentences create an overall system of marginal deterrence, where the worst crimes receive the worst penalties and lesser crimes receive lesser penalties. But when we abruptly abolish the top of the punishment paradigm, the entire system loses its merits, similar to ripping the apex predator out of a food chain. The penalty for each crime would shift down, making each one less and less. Imagine how this would change the risk calculus for the leaders of organized crime. They can now pursue more threatening operations, now at a much lower risk. Thirdly, is that there is no alternative. Congress eliminated federal parole in 1984, making life without parole or execution our only option for the country's most dangerous individuals. Sentencing the next 10 Bundy to 30 years won't cut it. Incapacitation via incarceration is the only proven remedy in preventing homicides. Their logic is a slippery slope to abolishing the entire justice system. If a lifetime of incarceration is so terrible, then surely any form of imprisonment must also go too. There will always be some injustice in the system that has no reason to abolish all of it. We must stick to what has been proven effective or face the consequences. The innocent life that is at most at risk is the victim of violent crime. We have an obligation to protect them, and thus we negate the plan. Okay, I'm now open to questions.
All right, timer starting now. Really quick, you specifically talked about how the punishment for each crime would decrease when we abolish the death penalty. How is this true, and how will that create a spillover effect where things such as, prison rates suddenly start decreasing?
So in the status quo, the U.S. has built a sort of system of marginal deterrence. What that means is that the worst crimes receive the worst penalties, i.e. things like murder, like serial killers, things like that. They get the death penalty, which means lesser crimes receive lesser penalties. But when we remove the option of the death penalty and life sentences, then it all shifts downward. So the worst crime could only receive, say, 30 years in jail. Because other crimes that may be bad receive less penalties, things like robbery, rape, things like that. All those penalties shift downward, making them more advantageous for criminals. You've said that every life has value. Why should, let's say, a serial killer who has deemed that their victim does not have the same value as them be treated like the same by the federal government, as just like the same as law-abiding citizens? Yeah,
certainly. So this is basically in the context of the rights that we give the people by the government. If we give the government the power to essentially take a human life, then that means that we are not allowing liberty and freedom. We argue that every person that lives in the United States should be allowed the same rights that every other person has, and allowing the government to have the right to kill certain civilians means that this is essentially modern day slavery, where we have more people being put into mass incarceration.
Have like serial killers not sacrifice their rights by committing a crime? Why should they have the same protections as a law-abiding citizen when they've
We
like
would
chosen.
argue that this is a slippery slope. Whenever you say that someone has done an action that should result in the government killing them, this could certainly spill over to other government restrictions and have the ability for them to continue a mass incarceration system. Saying that one individual does not have the same rights as another within the United States could mean that this could spill outward in the future, meaning that the government could infringe on more people's rights for other reasons.
So like the government has the same obligation to like a law-abiding citizen as it does to like a Ted Bundy.
We would argue that you should not be putting them to death or in jail for the indefinite future.
Okay, you can have a question.
Okay, yeah. So specifically, you were talking about how crime rates would increase if we take away the death penalty. What sorts of crimes would increase if we don't have the death penalty available, considering that there's only like, yeah.
So the best like statistical evidence backs up that murder rates would increase via the death penalty, but other harsh sentences like life sentences would reducing that would lead to an increase in other violent crimes, things like rape, kidnapping, and robberies. Those things would all increase as proven by the past studies since like 1975. All support the claim that reducing harsh punishments would lead to an overall increase in crime throughout the U.S. In your speech, you said, quote, that inmates learn from effective crime strategies from each other, and the time spent in jail may desensitize them to further imprisonment. Why is not an argument in favor of imprisoning them for life rather than letting them go, given that they will like become more aggressive after they're released?
Certainly, this card talks about, for example, how whenever we put people to jail for more time, this means that inmates could learn from one another. So not everyone is sentenced to life, which means that if you sentence more people to mass incarceration, this is going to cause more potential errors. But this piece of evidence also states that things such as junk science, false confessions, and government misconduct all result in essentially false people going on death row that shouldn't be there in the first place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm Donna. I'll be giving the second affirmative speech. Just to check, do I sound all right? Yep, okay, cool. Then let's begin. The death penalty and life without parole is an inherent violation of human dignity, and it does anything but reduce violent crime. If we want to understand the death penalty, we must understand its history. The death penalty was not created to stop serial killers, but rather it's rooted in slavery, and its origins is that it has historically been used to control slave populations. The majority of individuals who are incarcerated are those in minority communities. The negative team states that we don't stop people from being wrongly convicted. However, keeping the death penalty means that we do put those at risk for dying for a crime that they didn't even commit. It's painfully obvious that the rigorous review process is flawed because we still see people being wrongfully put to death because of junk science, false confessions, government misconduct, faulty snitches, and bad lawyering. While we do not condone serial killers, sustaining the ability to execute the guilty is not worth the risk of executing the innocent, especially when the death penalty is proven to be racially biased, their only crime being the color of their skin. The Death Penalty Information Center in 2019 isolates that since 1973, 185 former death row prisoners have been exonerated of all charges related to the wrongful convictions that have put them on death row. Innocent defendants will be convicted and sentenced to death as long as the death penalty exists. It's unlikely that the appeals process, focused on legal errors and not on factual determinations, will catch all the mistakes. Reforms have been implemented, increasing the cost and time that the death penalty consumes, but have not been sufficient to overcome human error. The remaining question is how many innocent lives are worth sacrificing to preserve this punishment? And punishment and deterrence are complex ideas that are influenced by multiple different factors. There's no comprehensive research that states that life without parole or the death penalty, or even that harsher sentences decrease crime. All of their studies are simply assertions and false correlational studies that assume a direct correlation, but ignores other facts such as the racist implications or the executions that happen under false pretenses. Our evidence states that the claim that the life without parole or the death penalty reduces crime is false because the thing that truly deters criminals is the threat of getting caught, not the consequence. However, longer sentences are more threatening because inmates learn more effective crimes from each other, and being in jail longer means they're more likely to be desensitized by the threat of future imprisonment. But there is a way that we can save both innocents from heinous crimes that are committed without sacrificing the few that will be wrongfully executed. While it's true that our plan alone does not stop false convictions, it does take away the power for the government to either have someone die by execution or be condemned to prison for the rest of their lives. The negative team incorrectly characterizes the affirmative as just unlocking all of the prison cells at once and letting criminals run free. But we don't do that. Rather, we allow for the possibility for them to be reintegrated into society and a chance to allow them to be more productive members through rehabilitation. Just because we don't solve everything immediately is not a reason to give up and stop trying, but rather it should motivate us to make our justice system better. They don't have any evidence saying that getting rid of life without parole would cause any increase in crime. Their evidence simply states that a sentencing reform act would have gotten rid of it, but Congress was simply scared to do it. But we shouldn't stop at getting rid of life without parole. We should work towards a world where we abolish all of the bad and racist portions of the criminal justice system. Poverty and inequality exist in our world today, which are disproportionately felt by minority communities. These things are not prevented by our criminal justice system, but rather they're sustained by it. Getting rid of the death penalty and life without parole is the first step to better, more restorative justice, a justice system that is not defined by how many criminals we can kill or how long we can throw someone into a prison, but one that's based on maintaining the dignity that's inherent within every one of us, and one that focuses on how we can make society better, not one where we respond to violence with simply more violence. Our plan to get rid of the death penalty does not preclude more forms of rehabilitation in social institutions, but rather it enables those things to happen in the first place through a frame of human dignity. If we want to truly combat both crime and systemic racism, we need to first take away the power that the prison industrial complex should have never had in the first place, the power to end someone's life. Thank you.
I'm June Park, and I'll be giving the last speech, the second negative. Can everyone hear me all right? All right, then let's begin. While you may be empathetic to getting rid of the death penalty, there are three main reasons the death penalty and life without parole are necessary. One, the death penalty increases the likelihood of innocence appealing and being resolved. Two, both punishments are necessary to deter crimes across the board. And lastly, there's not an alternative to the death penalty and life without parole. The affirmative team focuses too much on history when they call things on racist past and slavery, and is overly optimistic that ignores the reality that an effective and extreme punishment paradigm is necessary. While the death penalty may have a racist past, it is now utilized to execute and imprison the worst of the worst, i.e. rapists, serial killers, and shooters. First is the question of innocence. You should think about it in this way. Whether someone who is facing death row will have more resources, attention, and concern compared to someone who's going to get 30 years. Obviously, the death row inmate who's appealing will gain precedent. If they're if they're innocent, they would be released. Especially with modern day forensic science, quality is only getting better. Their examples are from places like the 1970s and 1980s, where we did have faulty science, but that is not comparable to the effective forensic science that we have now. So it is less and less likely that people will be convicted falsely. Second, the death penalty does deter crime. They might be right on a theoretical level, but only we have accurate academic studies to back up our claims. A Drexler review found a deterrent effect of 30 years across from 1975 to 2008. A comprehensive review over many states and counties finds that the effect of the death penalty can reduce the amount of crimes that exist in those counties. Furthermore, an Emory study found that there's direct causation, and per execution, it led to 18 less murders, which is 18 lives compared to the one that they're trying to save. It is also logical that some people are scared to commit heinous crimes because they would receive death or long life sentences. Professor Kleinstuber also finds that locking up individuals indefinitely reduces violent crime significantly and 3.1% plus on a national scale. This means while the affirmative wants to save a handful of lives, they condemn many to violent crimes and death via the hands of murderers and criminals who are released as a consequence of the plan. You should ask yourself, how does the affirmative cause criminals to be reintegrated into society? And why and how are the worst of the worst? Why should they be integrated? The issue with their claims is that people learn things in prisons, but life without parole and the death penalty make sure that they are never released again. Third and finally, their logic is inherently tautological, and there's not an alternative. If it is true that the death penalty and life without parole are racist, then those people would have to shift to lower part of the system. I.e., if we get rid of the death penalty and life without parole, then those criminals would have to receive life with parole or a 30-year-long sentence. This means that it creates a loop and a loop until we have invalidated every single part of the criminal justice system because parts of it are marginally racist. This is bolstered by the fact that they do not mandate rehabilitation or social services, but just release thousands and thousands of criminals back onto the streets. Monica Steiner is a lawyer and finds that the only option on a federal level are the death penalty and life without parole. Because of the plan, there would no longer be a punishment system in place on the federal level, which means that thousands of people would get let off, whether they're innocent or whether they are serial killers. Furthermore, Congress passed the Sentencing Reform Act because they were concerned about releasing potentially dangerous criminals, which means that on every single part of the government, there's a necessity for the death penalty and life without parole. At the end of this debate, you should be confident that even if you think that the death penalty could be bad in some wrong issues, the further and further the development of forensic science means that faulty executions no longer happen, and the death penalty and life without parole are a necessary concession to combat the evils that plague the United States and stop much, much further atrocities from having be a violent crime and murders from people that could have been executed or locked up indefinitely.
Okay, so that is a short sort of example. Usually in a normal debate round, each speaker will give 2 speeches and they progressively get a little bit shorter, but because of time constraints, we just decided that having each of them give a demonstration speech, kind of how a debate would unfold, is probably the best way to do this. I know that both myself and any of the debaters would be happy to answer any questions that you all might have, but other than that, yeah.
I have a question. I'm just curious, what's the resolution going to be this fall? You know yet?
Yeah, next year's resolution is going to be about protection of water resources. So next year we're going to be debating the Clean Water Act and protection of aquifers, as well as protection of coastal waters. There'll be a lot of stuff about toxic waste dumping in waters and lead concentrations in Flint, and those are sort of the concepts we'll be debating next year.
And how did debates get held this year with COVID? Was it all virtual?
Yeah, it was all on Zoom. So even the state tournament was on Zoom. So we've been adjusting to it, different microphones, different computers, trying all sorts of different things. But yeah, this is how we've been doing it, so.
I have a question. Does each debater do their own research in order to get content for the speeches? And if so, is there a library of materials, or are they just let loose into the world to find their support?
Yeah, so our debaters, so largely we have sort of a top-down approach among our debaters, which means that our older debaters are more focused on producing the research that our entire team uses. Our younger debaters, we mainly are trying to develop argumentative skills, actually responding to other people's evidence. So the first year that students take debate here at Washburn Rural, they don't do that much research, they do a little bit, but not very much. These 4 spend a lot of time researching. And we do have a giant shared file system online. We use Dropbox. A lot of other schools just use Google Drive, where they house all of their evidence. And we have thousands and thousands of pages of research. Because this debate was just sort of a snapshot of the overarching system, So in this particular debate, the affirmative said that we should get rid of the death penalty, but sometimes the affirmative says we should get rid of mandatory minimums, or that we should decriminalize marijuana, or that we should do a litany of different policy strategies. And we have evidence to respond to all of those things. So there's an incredible amount of research that these debaters are doing.
I don't really have a question, but I want to just say thank you for your presentations, and I want to applaud all of you, you 4 and the rest of your team, for all the incredible work that you do and that you've stuck it out for this time. I will tell you, as a 4-year high school debater, the skills that you're learning right now and have in many instances mastered will serve you very, very well for life. So keep up the good work. It was fabulous.
Tim, this is Larry. I echo that, having debated in high school from 1970 to 74. The life skills that you are helping these students and future students hone are truly life skills. How to organize, how to clarify, how to synopsize, how to think on your feet. It's great. So, you know, to everybody who was speaking today, it was great, and it brought me back, and yet it made me feel that we're in good hands. We're in great hands, and thank you, Tim.
Do we have other questions?
I just have a comment. I did not debate in high school, but I am an attorney, and I have to say that I was very impressed by the affirmative and the negative arguments. I would comment that if you speak that fast when you get into a courtroom, which I assume one of you four is going, at least one of you four, if not all, are going to be attorneys, the court reporter will crucify you for that. But I understand that you have to speak that fast because you're under time constraints now. And I was very, very impressed. Also impressed by the fact that, you know, this is the death penalty and the social justice is a fairly, it's a fairly hot topic, you know, right now. And I can't imagine that, you know, because I know I had a daughter that competed in debate for a semester, and I know that you don't necessarily know going in. I think that whether you're going to be affirmative or negative, and you may have some very strongly held personal beliefs about the subject that you're going to have to present, you know, the side that opposes your own personal beliefs. And so I really commend you for being able to do that. I'm really impressed, and I'm really happy with the future of this country if you four are an example of that.
I have one comment, but I would just tell you, if you haven't already, click on the chat and you can find out how Angel met her husband, which was through debate. It's a great story. In any event, do we have any other questions? Well, thank you, Coach Ellis, and thank you to our debaters. Interesting, inspiring, very bright young individuals. And by the way, I had mentioned earlier, they have the Rotary Youth Leadership Academy, and that is available, or they would be eligible for concluding their junior year. So if any of your debaters have an interest in that, you do not have to come from a Rotary family, but it is a good program, both virtual and in person. So if anybody is interested, send them my way and I'll get them an application. I think that concludes what I've got. I have no additional announcements other than next week. Our presentation will be by Kathleen Marker, a well-known person to our club. She had to switch to the South Club because of scheduling issues, but Kathleen is going to give us an update on the Human Trafficking Day Center that is run by the YWCA. A great success story, and our club had a lot to do with getting that off the ground. So with that, I'm going to recite the four-way test, four-way, and I'll call it the four-way plus. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And will it be fun? And will it be kind? With that, I say goodbye to everybody. Stay healthy, stay safe, get vaccinated as soon as you can if you haven't already. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.